Admiral Rachel Hayes stood at the main window of Earth Defense Command, her gray eyes fixed on the holographic display, showing the retreat of the last Galactic Coalition ships. Each disappearing dot represented another ally abandoning humanity to face the darkness alone. Her hands, clasped behind her back, tightened until her knuckles turned white. "They're really leaving us," said Captain David Miller, his voice quiet but filled with disbelief. He stood beside her, his weathered face reflecting the blue glow of the tactical displays. At 45, he had seen his share of battles, but nothing like this. Rachel turned to face the command center, where dozens of officers worked at their stations. The room hummed with tension and purpose. "They're afraid," she said simply. "The void entities destroyed 3 of their core worlds. Fear makes people run." A soft chime announced the arrival of Dr. Emma Foster, who hurried into the room clutching her data tablet. Her blonde hair was messy, and dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. "Admiral, you need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. "The void entities, they're changing their pattern." The main screen switched to show a mass of swirling darkness approaching the outer colonies. Unlike the random attacks of the past months, these movements showed clear purpose and direction. They were organizing for a major offensive. Rachel moved to the central tactical table, her mind racing through options. Earth's combined fleet consisted of just 200 capital ships and 1,000 support vessels. Against the endless darkness of the void, it seemed painfully small. "Dr. Foster, what's your analysis?" Rachel asked, studying the patterns of movement. Emma zoomed in on one section of the display. "They're learning, adapting. Each attack makes them smarter. But there's something else." She hesitated. "I detected energy signatures that suggest they're not just destroying worlds, they're consuming them, converting matter into something else." David stepped forward, his face grim. "The Thermopylae is ready for combat, Admiral. We've upgraded the shields based on Dr. Foster's last recommendations." Rachel nodded slowly, a plan forming in her mind. "Captain Miller, I want your ship leading the defense of the outer colonies. You're our best tactical commander, and those people will need every advantage they can get." She turned to Emma. "Doctor, I need options. Weapons, defenses, anything that might give us an edge." "I have some theories," Emma replied, her eyes lighting up with determination. "The void entities react strangely to certain radiation frequencies. If we can amplify that effect." The room fell silent as a new alert flashed across the screens. The void had begun its attack on the Mars colony. Thousands of swirling dark shapes descended on the red planet, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Rachel straightened her uniform and faced her officers. Her voice carried across the command center, strong and clear. "I know many of you are scared. Our allies have abandoned us. The enemy seems unstoppable. But humanity didn't reach the stars by giving up when things got difficult." She pointed to the tactical display. "Every world they destroy makes them stronger. If Earth falls, there will be nothing left to stop them from consuming everything. We are the last line of defense, not just for humanity, but for all life in this galaxy." David nodded firmly. "The Thermopylae will be ready to launch in 2 hours, Admiral." "Good," Rachel replied. "Because I need you to coordinate with the Colonial Defense Forces. Show them that Earth hasn't abandoned them, even if everyone else has." Emma spoke up, her voice determined. "I'll have my team working round the clock on countermeasures. There has to be a way to stop them." Rachel looked back at the display, watching as Mars' defensive satellites engaged the void entities. Red dots began disappearing as the colony's defenses were overwhelmed. They had to find a way to stop this, or humanity would face the same fate as countless worlds before them. "Send the word to all commands," she ordered. "This is humanity's last stand. We hold the line here, or everything ends. No retreat, no surrender." She turned to face her officers, her expression fierce. "We are all that stands between civilization and the darkness, and we will not fail." As klaxons began to sound throughout the EDC headquarters, Rachel Hayes prepared herself for the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. The darkness was coming, but humanity's warriors were ready to fight back. The U.S. Thermopylae shuddered as another wave of void entities crashed against its shields. Captain David Miller gripped his command chair, watching as the darkness swirled around his ship's viewports. The colony world of Europa Prime burned below them, its cities already half consumed by the enemy. Shields at 40%. His tactical officer shouted. "We can't take much more of this, sir." David leaned forward, studying the energy readings on his display. Something was different about this attack. The void entities were giving off unusual radiation patterns he hadn't seen before. "Transfer all power to the forward sensors," he ordered. "There's something strange about their energy signature." The ship's AI compiled the data as they fought. Through the chaos of battle, David noticed that when his ship's standard scanning beams hit the entities at certain frequencies, they would briefly recoil. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign of weakness they'd ever seen in these creatures. Back on Earth, Dr. Emma Foster received the Thermopylae's data transmission. She hadn't slept in 3 days, running on coffee and determination. When she saw the sensor readings, her tired eyes went wide. "This is it," she exclaimed to her team. "Look at how they react to the gamma spectrum emissions. They're not just avoiding it. They're being hurt by it." Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she began modeling new weapons based on this discovery. If they could amplify those frequencies and focus them properly, they might have a real chance at fighting back. In the EDC command center, Admiral Rachel Hayes watched with growing dread as another red dot vanished from the tactical display. The colony on Mars had finally gone dark after 2 days of desperate fighting. The evacuation ships had only managed to save 60% of the population. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're getting reports of void entities approaching Saturn's rings. They're moving faster than we've ever seen them travel before." Rachel studied the movement patterns. The enemy was learning, adapting its tactics. They no longer attacked randomly. They were deliberately cutting off escape routes and targeting defensive installations first. "Get me Captain Miller," she ordered. When David's face appeared on her screen, she could see the battle damage in his ship's bridge behind him. "David, what's your status?" "We're still in the fight," he reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Admiral, we found something. These things, they have a weakness. Dr. Foster should be receiving our data now." A smile crossed Rachel's face for the first time in days. "She's already working on it. Can you hold your position?" "We'll hold as long as we need to," David replied. "But we got civilians down here needing evacuation." "Understood. The U.S. Saratoga is en route to your position. Just keep those things busy for 2 more hours." The battle for Europa Prime raged on as David's ship drew the void entities away from the civilian evacuation zones. The Thermopylae's engines burned hot as they weaved through the swarm, using the new sensor frequencies to keep the creatures at bay. In her lab, Emma worked frantically to develop a weapon based on the new discovery. Her team had already modified a standard ship's phaser array to emit the specific radiation frequencies that seemed to harm the void entities. "We need to test this now," she told Rachel over the comm. "We don't have time for safety protocols." Rachel agreed. "The Thermopylae is in the best position to test it. Send the modifications to Captain Miller's ship." David received the upgrade specifications as his ship circled Europa Prime's North Pole. "Engineering. Implement Dr. Foster's modifications to the main phaser array. Divert all available power to weapons." The ship's weapons officer quickly made the changes. When the next wave of void entities attacked, the Thermopylae was ready. "Fire," David ordered. The modified phaser beam lanced out, glowing with a strange purple light. When it struck the nearest cluster of void entities, they didn't just recoil. They scattered, their dark substance seeming to burn away where the beam touched them. "Direct hit," the weapons officer shouted. "They're retreating from the beam." David immediately sent the combat data back to Earth. For the first time since the war began, humanity had found a way to hurt these creatures. Rachel watched the footage with fierce satisfaction. "Send these modifications to every ship in the fleet," she ordered, "and get Dr. Foster whatever she needs to improve the weapon's effectiveness." As the new weapons data spread through Earth's forces, a sense of hope began to replace despair. They had found a weakness in the enemy's armor. Now they just had to survive long enough to exploit it. The darkness still pressed in from all sides, but humanity's warriors had drawn their line in space. And for the first time, they had the tools to hold it. The battle in Saturn's rings turned space itself into a light show. Hundreds of human ships fired their new purple glowing weapons at the void entities. Ice and rock from the rings reflected the light, creating a dazzling but deadly display. Admiral Rachel Hayes watched from her command ship, the EDC Defiant. "Status report," she demanded, her voice tense. "We've lost 37 ships," her officer replied. "But the void entities are falling back. The new weapons are working." The victory came at a terrible cost. Each lost ship meant hundreds of dead crew members. But for the first time, humanity was pushing the darkness back. Captain David Miller's ship, the Thermopylae, led a group of destroyers through the rings. They used the ice and rocks as cover, surprising groups of void entities with quick attacks. "Keep pressing them," David ordered. "Don't let them regroup." His crew worked with perfect focus, their months of fighting having turned them into a seamless team. Back on Earth, Dr. Emma Foster made an incredible discovery. She hadn't left her lab in days, studying samples of destroyed void entities that ships had managed to collect. "This can't be right," she muttered, checking her results again. "Admiral Hayes, I need to speak with you immediately." Rachel left the battle command to her second and went to Emma's lab. The scientist's eyes were wide with excitement and fear. "They're parasites," Emma explained, pointing to her screens. "Ancient cosmic parasites. They don't just destroy worlds, they convert all matter into more of themselves, and they're all connected to each other, like a giant space-spanning hive mind." Rachel's face grew grave. "So when we kill one, they all learn from it," Emma finished. "That's why our weapons won't work for long. They're already starting to adapt." Back at Saturn, David noticed the change. The void entities were moving differently now, staying just out of range of the modified weapons. "They're learning," he reported to Rachel. "Our weapons aren't hurting them as much anymore." Rachel made a decision she had hoped to avoid. "All ships fall back to defensive positions," she ordered. "It's time for the quantum arsenal." Earth's quantum weapons were their last resort. These devices could tear holes in space itself. They had never been used in actual combat because they were too dangerous. David moved his ship behind Saturn's largest moon. "All hands, brace for quantum detonation." The EDC Defiant launched 3 quantum torpedoes. As they approached the largest cluster of void entities, space itself seemed to bend. Then, with a flash that outshone Saturn's rings, the weapons exploded. The quantum blasts created holes in reality that sucked in everything nearby. Hundreds of void entities disappeared into the tiers in space. Even some of the ring material vanished, creating new gaps in Saturn's beautiful rings. When the light faded, nearly a third of the void swarm was gone. But the cost was high. The quantum weapons had damaged space itself in that region. Strange energy readings warned that the area would be dangerous to travel through for years to come. "Battle report," Rachel called out, her voice heavy. 62 ships lost," her officer replied. "But we've destroyed more void entities than in all our previous battles combined." Emma studied the readings from the quantum blast. "The space damage might actually help us," she said. "The void entities can't pass through the torn areas. We can use this to create barriers." David's ship limped back to Earth for repairs. The Thermopylae's hull was scared from battle, but his crew had survived. As they approached their home planet, he looked at the pictures of Earth on his screen. The blue world still shined, still survived, despite everything the darkness had thrown at it. Rachel met with Earth's Defense Council to report their victory. "We've won our first major battle," she told them. "But the war is far from over. The Void will adapt to our quantum weapons, just like they adapted to everything else. We need more options." Emma worked with her team to study the quantum blast data. "If we can understand how the space tiers affect them, maybe we can find a better way to fight them," she said. "One that doesn't risk breaking reality itself." As the day ended, Rachel stood at her usual spot in the command center. The victory had given humanity hope, but she knew the Void entities would return. They always returned, stronger and smarter than before. But now humanity knew something important. The darkness could be fought. It could be beaten. The price was high, but they would pay it. They would pay anything to keep Earth safe. Because in the endless dark of space, Earth was all they had left. The Jupiter Defense Platform, humanity's strongest outpost in the outer solar system, burned. The Void entities had changed their attack pattern completely, moving like a giant black wave that absorbed everything in its path. They had adapted to both the radiation weapons and learned to avoid the quantum-damaged areas of space. Admiral Rachel Hayes watched the live feed with a heavy heart. "How many people were on the station?" she asked quietly. 8,000, Admiral," her aide replied. "We got about half of them out before communications failed." The loss of the Jupiter station was a heavy blow. It had been their main repair and resupply point for the outer system fleet. Now they would have to fall back closer to Mars orbit for repairs. On the Thermopylae, Captain David Miller prepared for another rescue mission. His ship had become famous for saving trapped civilians, and now a research base on Europa needed help. "The Void entities are between us and the base," his navigation officer reported. "There's no clear path through." David studied the tactical display. "Then we'll make our own path. Ready the emergency jump drives." Emergency jumps were dangerous. They could tear a ship apart. But David had no choice. 400 scientists and their families waited on Europa, and time was running out. In her lab on Earth, Dr. Emma Foster made another breakthrough. She hadn't slept in 30 hours, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Look at this pattern," she told her team, pointing to a complex data display. "Every Void entity moves in perfect sync with the others, even across vast distances. It's not just a hive mind. It's a single consciousness split across millions of bodies." She sent her findings to Rachel immediately. "If we can find the main control node, we might be able to disrupt their entire network." Rachel was about to respond when an alert flashed across her screen. The Thermopylae had begun its rescue mission at Europa. She diverted her attention to the operation, knowing David's tendency for bold tactics. The Thermopylae appeared right in the middle of the Void swarm, its emergency jump successful, but leaving the ship's systems strained. "All weapons, fire in a spiral pattern," David ordered. "Clear us a path to that base." His crew responded perfectly. The ship spun as it fired, creating a temporary safe zone in the swarm. They reached the base just as the Void entities began to regroup. "We have 5 minutes to get everyone aboard," David announced over the base's speakers. "Move quickly and stay calm." On Earth, political pressure was mounting. Several government officials wanted to surrender, to try making peace with the Void. "They're not here for peace," Rachel argued in the council chamber. "They're here to consume everything. You can't negotiate with a force of nature." "Then what hope do we have?" one council member demanded. "Our weapons barely slow them down anymore." Rachel's answer was cut off by Emma rushing into the chamber, breaking all protocol. "Admiral, I have it. The Prometheus Protocol. I know how to make it work." The Prometheus Protocol was a theoretical weapon, designed but never built because of its extreme power. It could destroy the Void entities, but it might also cause massive damage to nearby space. As they discussed the protocol, David's ship limped back to Earth. The rescue mission had succeeded, But the Thermopyla's hull was nearly broken. They had saved 387 people, losing 13 brave crew members in the process. Rachel visited the ship in space dock, walking its scared corridors with David. "We can't keep fighting like this," he said, showing her the damage. "We need something bigger, something they can't adapt to." "Dr. Foster might have found it," Rachel replied, "but using it could be as dangerous as losing." Back in her lab, Emma worked on the final calculations for the Prometheus protocol. Her simulations showed it would work, but the cost would be enormous. It would change the very nature of space and the solar system. "Sometimes survival means making impossible choices," she told Rachel later that day. "The void entities are gathering for something big. We need to be ready." Rachel stood at her usual spot in the command center, watching the enemy movements. The void had learned from every battle, grown stronger with every victory and defeat. But so had humanity. "Begin construction of the Prometheus device," she ordered finally. "We've run out of other options." As her order went out, she thought of all those they'd lost. The Jupiter station, the Mars colony, countless ships, and brave crews. Their sacrifices had bought humanity time. Now they had to make that time count. The darkness was preparing its biggest attack yet, but humanity was done running. They would meet this threat with everything they had, no matter the cost. Dr. Emma Foster hadn't left her lab in 3 days when she finally found the answer. Her hand shook as she looked at the test results again. "It's not just radiation that hurts them," she said into her recorder. "It's specific frequencies of light combined with sound waves in space. Together, they disrupt their entire structure." She rushed to Admiral Rachel Hayes's office, barely stopping to catch her breath. "Admiral, we can beat them. We don't need the Prometheus protocol." Rachel looked up from her battle plans, hope lighting up her tired eyes. "Show me." Emma pulled up her data on the main screen. "Look here. When we combine these frequencies, the void entities don't just get hurt. They fall apart completely. And best of all, they can't adapt to it because it attacks the very thing that makes them what they are." "How quickly can we modify our ships?" Rachel asked. "The Thermopyla is in dock for repairs. We can update it first as a test," Emma replied. Captain David Miller stood in his ship's engine room, watching as Emma's team installed the new weapons system. The Thermopyla's hull still showed battle scars, but its spirit remained unbroken. "Will it work?" he asked Emma. She nodded confidently. "The math is solid. We're basically creating a wave of energy that breaks their bonds apart, like using the right musical note to shatter a glass." As they worked, something unexpected happened. A secret message arrived from their former allies. The Galactic Coalition had been watching Earth's fight against the Void. "They're impressed," Rachel told her officers. "They're sending us supplies through hidden channels. Not soldiers, but everything else we need." David's ship launched 3 days later, ready to test the new weapon. They didn't have to wait long. A group of void entities attacked a supply route near Mars. "All hands to battle stations," David ordered. "Let's show them what this new system can do." The Thermopyla approached the void swarm. Dark shapes swirled around the ship, ready to attack. "Activate the disruption field," David commanded. The new weapon created waves of light and sound that spread out from the ship. Where they touched the void entities, something amazing happened. The darkness didn't just retreat, it fell apart completely. "It's working," Emma shouted from her lab on Earth, watching the data stream in. "Keep going." The void entities tried to adapt, tried to change their structure, but they couldn't. The weapon affected something too basic about their nature. Rachel watched from command as more data came in. "Send the weapon plans to all ships," she ordered. Priority 1. News spread through the fleet. For the first time since the war began, humanity had a weapon the enemy couldn't adapt to. Ships began to fight back effectively, pushing the darkness away from their worlds. David's crew cheered as another group of void entities dissolved under their attack. The Thermopylae led a group of ships in clearing the space around Mars. On Earth, Emma worked with engineers to make the weapon even stronger. If we can increase the range, she explained, we can protect entire planets at once. But the void entities weren't done. They gathered their forces, pulling back from smaller attacks. Something bigger was coming. They're learning in a different way, Emma warned. Not adapting to the weapon, but changing their tactics. Rachel studied the enemy movements. The void entities were gathering into one massive force, larger than anything they'd seen before. They're going to try to overwhelm us, she realized. Hit us with so many forces that we can't destroy them all fast enough. David brought the Thermopylae back to Earth for more upgrades. We need to be ready, he told his crew. This is where we prove that humanity doesn't break. As ships gathered around Earth, Rachel felt a change in her people. They weren't just fighting because they had to anymore. They were fighting because they had become something new. Warriors who stood against the darkness when no one else would. Former allies sent more supplies in secret. Earth's factories worked day and night building new ships and weapons. Every human knew what was coming, and they prepared. We've lost so much, Rachel told her officers, but we've gained something too. We've learned how strong we really are. The greatest battle was coming. The void would throw everything it had at Earth, but humanity was ready. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors of the light, and the darkness would learn to fear them. The space near Neptune turned bright with weapons fire as humanity launched its biggest attack yet. 300 ships, led by Captain David Miller's Thermopylae, pushed into the heart of void territory. All ships, activate disruption fields, David ordered. The new weapons lit up space with waves of light and sound. Where they touched the void entities, the darkness broke apart and faded away. On the bridge of her command ship, Admiral Rachel Hayes watched the battle unfold. Status report, she called out. Enemy forces are falling back, her tactical officer replied. We've destroyed about 40% of their staging area. But something wasn't right. Dr. Emma Foster, watching from her lab on Earth, noticed it first. Admiral, she called over the comm. The void entities, they're not really retreating. They're forming something. The darkness swirled together, combining into one massive shape. Thousands of void entities merged into a single giant creature, bigger than anything they had seen before. All ships, fall back, Rachel ordered. But it was too late. The massive void creature struck, its dark tendrils ripping through 3 human ships before they could react. The disruption field still worked, but the creature was so big that it could lose parts of itself and keep fighting. David turned the Thermopylae toward the monster. Focus all power to the disruption field, he commanded. We need to hit it with everything we have. Emma worked frantically at her computer, studying the readings. Then she saw something that made her heart jump. The dimensional rifts, she shouted. Every time we destroy part of it, I'm seeing energy patterns like the rifts they use to travel between spaces. If we can understand these patterns, Rachel caught on quickly. We could find a way to close their entry points, trap them out of our space completely. The battle raged on. Human ships fought in perfect coordination, their crews hardened by months of war. They had learned to work together, to think ahead of their enemy. The giant void creature tried to adapt, tried to change its form, but humanity's weapons kept hitting it from all sides. Parts of it broke away and dissolved into nothing. Look at the energy readings, Emma called to Rachel. The creature is losing power. But more importantly, I can see where their rifts connect to our space. We can seal them. David's ship took heavy damage, but kept fighting. The Thermopylae's disruption field had been modified to work at closer range, making it more powerful but more dangerous to use. We need to get closer, he told his crew. We have to keep it busy while Dr. Foster figures out how to seal the rifts. Emma's fingers flew over her keyboard as she worked out the calculations. Admiral, if we modify the disruption fields to match these frequencies, we can close their entry points. but we'll need to hit all of them at once. Rachel made her decision. All ships, form up into attack groups. Prepare to fire on my mark. The fleet moved into position, surrounding the massive void creature. Its dark tendrils lashed out, damaging more ships, but they held their ground. Now, Rachel ordered. Every ship fired at once, their modified disruption fields creating a web of energy around the creature. Where the fields crossed, space itself seemed to ripple. The void creature thrashed wildly, sensing what they were trying to do. It struck out at the nearest ships, including the Thermopylae. Hull breach on Deck 3. David's damage control officer shouted. Keep firing, he ordered. Don't let up. Emma watched her screens intently. It's working. The rifts are starting to close. The creature fought harder as its connection to whatever dark dimension it came from began to fail. But humanity had learned too much, grown too strong. The rifts started closing one by one, bright flashes marking each sealed portal. The creature's movements became more desperate. Last rift is closing, Emma reported. Just a few more seconds. With a final, massive burst of energy from the human fleet, the last rift sealed. The giant void creature, cut off from its home dimension, began to break apart. David watched from his damaged ship as the darkness that had threatened Earth for so long finally began to fade away. We did it, he said quietly. Rachel stood in her command center, watching the last pieces of the creature dissolve. They had won this battle, but she knew one more fight remained. Somewhere out there, the main force of the void still waited. But now, they knew how to beat them. Now they had the tools, the knowledge, and the strength. Humanity had faced the darkness and found their own light. The final battle was coming, and this time, they were ready for it. Earth shone blue and beautiful in space, but now black clouds of void entities surrounded it. The enemy had brought their entire remaining force for one final attack. Millions of dark shapes blocked out the stars, all moving as one massive army. Admiral Rachel Hayes stood on her command ship's bridge. All ships report ready, her officer said. The Thermopylae is in position. This is it, Rachel broadcast to the fleet. Everything we've learned, everything we've lost and gained, it all comes down to today. Humanity stands together. Captain David Miller checked his ship's systems one last time. The Thermopylae's hull still showed scars from dozens of battles, but its weapons were at full power. His crew worked with quiet confidence, hardened by months of war. Multiple dimensional rifts opening, came the alert. They're attacking from all sides. The void entities poured through, but this time Earth was ready. The human fleet activated their disruption fields, creating a web of light and sound around the planet. Where the fields touched the darkness, it broke apart and faded away. Dr. Emma Foster coordinated the attack from Earth's Defense Center. Keep your frequencies synchronized, she ordered. Don't let them slip through any gaps. The battle raged fierce and bright around Earth. Human ships fought with skill and courage, using everything they had learned. The void entities tried to adapt, tried to change their tactics, but humanity had grown too strong. Then David noticed something dangerous. The rifts, they're getting bigger. They're trying to bring through something massive. Emma's sensors confirmed his warning. It's their central mass. They're risking everything on one final attack. Through the growing rifts came a darkness deeper than space itself. The void's main consciousness, a being of incredible size and power, began to emerge into normal space. Rachel made a quick decision. All ships fall back to secondary positions. Captain Miller, are you ready? Yes, Admiral, David replied. The Thermopylae knows what to do. While they had fought the earlier battles, Emma and her team had modified David's ship. The Thermopylae now carried a special version of the rift sealing technology, powerful enough to close even the largest portals. But using it would destroy the ship. It has been an honor, David told his crew. Evacuation pods ready. Get to your stations. The crew refused to leave. We're staying, Captain. His first officer said, "All of us." The massive void consciousness emerged further into space, its darkness stretching across thousands of miles. Other ships hit it with their disruption fields, but it was too big to destroy directly. "Now, Captain Miller," Rachel ordered. The Thermopylae charged straight toward the largest rift, its engines burning at maximum power. David's hands were steady on the controls as his ship flew into the heart of darkness. "Activate the sealing device," he ordered. "Full power." The ship lit up with energy, brighter than a small sun. The light spread outward, touching each dimensional rift in turn. The void consciousness tried to retreat, but it was too late. "The rifts are closing," Emma reported, watching from Earth. All of them at once. The Thermopylae's light grew brighter and brighter. In his final moment, David smiled. They had won. Its ship exploded in a flash that lit up the entire solar system. The blast sealed every rift, trapping the void consciousness between dimensions. Cut off from its power source, the great darkness began to break apart. "All ships, full attack," Rachel ordered, her voice strong despite her tears for David and his crew. "Don't let up until every last piece is gone." The human fleet struck with everything they had. Their weapons tore through what remained of the void forces. Without their dimensional rifts, without their main consciousness, the smaller entities couldn't adapt or survive. When it was over, Earth's skies were clear again. The stars shone bright against the black of space, no darkness left to hide them. In the days that followed, humanity's former allies returned, ashamed of their retreat. They found Earth's people changed. Humanity had become stronger, more unified, more determined. Rachel stood in the rebuilt command center, looking at reports from across the galaxy. Earth's ships now patrolled the stars. Protecting other worlds from any remaining threats, they had become the guardians they needed when no one else would help. Emma's research had revolutionized space travel and defense. The knowledge they gained fighting the void made humanity the most advanced civilization in known space. "Captain Miller would be proud," Emma said, standing beside Rachel. Rachel nodded, watching Earth's defense fleet patrol the skies. The void had tried to destroy them, but instead made them stronger. When their allies faded away, humanity's warriors had held back the darkness, and they would keep holding it back, protecting not just Earth, but all who needed help among the stars. Because that's what warriors of the light do.